Nick asks the viewer to look out their front window. Viewer looks out and sees their driveway a rectangular slab of concrete or asphalt.
Oh?
Nick explains that the driveway sits unused for 10 to 12 hours a day. Nick points out that the driveway is costing money through property taxes, mortgage, and maintenance. Nick calls the driveway a dead asset. A scenario unfolds. Someone sits at their desk, staring at their bank account, stressed about money. The person cuts Netflix and coffee expenses but still struggles financially. The person searches YouTube for passive income ideas. The person is bombarded with advice about dropshipping, ebooks, and crypto mining. Nick reveals the solution. The driveway itself is an underused asset. Nick highlights that people in the city are eager to pay for parking. Intro sequence begins. Nick introduces himself as someone obsessed with turning wasted resources into financial freedom. Nick encourages viewers to subscribe and like the video. Nick begins a discussion about the myth of passive income. Nick explains that most so-called passive side hustles are actually low-paying second jobs. Nick gives examples. Running an Etsy shop involves inventory and customer service. Nick mentions that running a YouTube channel is far from passive. Nick contrasts this with renting out a physical asset you already own. Nick introduces the micro-real estate phase of the sharing economy. Nick mentions apps that let you rent out your driveway, carport, or garage. Nick anticipates skepticism. Who would pay to park in my driveway? Nick shares a statistic. Commuters waste 54 to 107 hours a year searching for parking. Nick explains that this wasted time is valued at $2,250 per driver. Nick emphasizes that people pay for certainty in parking. Nick transitions to discussing the financial math of renting a driveway. Nick sets a scenario. Living near a hospital, university, or downtown area. Nick states that parking can rent for $10 to $15 a day, or $150 to $300 a month. Nick conservatively estimates renting a driveway for $150 a month. Nick calculates $150 a month equals $1,800 a year. Nick acknowledges that $150 a month may seem insignificant. Nick challenges this mindset, calling for a psychological shift. Nick compares earning $1,800 a year from dividend stocks versus a driveway. Nick writes on a whiteboard, it would take $51,428 invested at 3.5% to earn $1,800 in dividends. Nick highlights the power of simply listing your driveway on an app. Nick explains that your home is a bundle of underutilized assets. Nick notes that people think making money from a house means selling or renting a bedroom. Nick points out that a driveway doesn't use utilities or require sharing space. Nick describes the driveway as just dirt and concrete. Nick anticipates concerns about stranger danger. Nick acknowledges discomfort about having a stranger's car parked nearby. Nick explains the endowment effect, overvaluing what we own and fearing intrusion. Nick compares driveway rental to other sharing economy activities like DoorDash and Uber. Nick argues that renting a driveway is less invasive than other sharing services. Nick addresses objection 1, fear of oil stains. It suggests cheap solutions like kitty litter and degreaser. Nick argues that minor maintenance shouldn't block major financial gain. Nick addresses objection 2, fear that renters won't leave. Nick explains that apps have terms of service and towing agreements. Nick compares driveway rental to a parking garage in terms of legal rights. Nick addresses objection 3, legality concerns. Nick explains that most local rules target commercial repair shops, not simple parking. Nick introduces the storage angle, renting for long-term vehicle storage. Nick mentions people with boats, trailers, or classic cars needing storage. Nick explains that long-term storage is even more passive and rarely involves seeing the renter. Nick concludes that renting out a driveway can be a simple, passive source of income. Nick stands in front of a whiteboard introducing the topic, the app no one uses. Nick gestures as he mentions popular apps like Airbnb and Turo. Nick reveals a phone screen with the neighborapp logo displayed. Nick explains Neighbor as the Airbnb of storage, showing visual examples of basements, sheds, and driveways. A split-screen comparison. Old-school parking apps like JustPark and Spot Hero on one side, Neighbor on the other. Someone anxiously checking their phone for a Spot Hero spot before a baseball game. It contrasts this with a relaxed person earning money from their driveway through Neighbor. Nick introduces Mike, showing a suburban house with a 3-car driveway and only 1 car parked. Mike is seen taking photos of his empty driveway stall. Mike lists his driveway spot on the neighborapp, selecting airport parking as the category. A traveler compares airport parking prices $253,040 per day, looking shocked. The traveler sees Mike's listing, $100 a month, and smiles at the savings. A calendar flips through 3 weeks, showing the traveler's car parked safely in Mike's driveway. Mike receives $100 via the neighborapp notification. Year passes in a time-lapse showing Mike earning $1,200 from his driveway. Mike pays his home insurance premium online, satisfied. Visual metaphor. A single driveway transforms into a shield protecting Mike's house. Nick explains the wealthy mindset, showing icons for stacking small wins. Driveway pays insurance, spare room pays taxes, dividends pay groceries. A person with a 9-to-5 job is shown feeling retired thanks to these small income streams. Nick transitions to a step-by-step guide, holding up a checklist titled, Nick Method for Driveway ROI. Step 1. A driveway is pressure washed, transforming from dirty and cracked to spotless and inviting. A side-by-side of a clean white concrete pad versus a weed-infested cracked patch. Step 2. A ring camera and floodlight camera installed. Their footage shown monitoring the driveway. Listing headline reads, Secure, camera-monitored parking. A price tag increases by 20% due to the added security feature. Step 3. A listing description highlights clear boundaries. Available Monday-Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. A clock and calendar illustrate the restricted access times. A stranger tries to access the driveway at dinner time but is stopped by clear instructions. Step 4. Mike checks prices at a nearby parking garage and storage unit. Mike calculates a price 30% lower than competitors, smiling at his profit margin. A visual breakdown shows Mike's overhead costs as zero, emphasizing the pure profit. Nick pivots to the surprising revelation about tax advantages. A chart compares self-employment tax for Uber freelance. Income 15.3% versus passive rental income 0%. ACPA is shown advising someone about deducting home expenses for business use. A portion of the house is highlighted as income-producing property for tax efficiency. A $150 payment is shown, then morphs into a $200 value due to tax advantages. Nick summarizes, You're not just making $150, you're making tax-advantaged $150. Nick addresses the audience, noting that most people will just think it's a cool idea and move on. People are shown scrolling on their phones, ignoring the opportunity. Split screen. One person complains about inflation and mortgage. Another takes action with neighbor. Nick emphasizes the difference. Willingness to use what you already have. A driveway is labeled as a $50,000 asset on vacation. The driveway is animated to wake up and start earning money. Nick encourages viewers to check out Neighbor, Spacer, or JustPark. A person spends 10 minutes browsing local parking spot listings on their phone. A comment box appears. Would you let a stranger park in your driveway for $150 a month? Multiple viewers type responses, weighing privacy versus profit. Nick points to a video thumbnail about cars as debt traps. Nick signs off with advice. Spend less than you make. Invest the rest. The screen fades out with a final message. See you in the next one.